Welcome to another edition of Tiny Tent Show, the online program put together by the Big Top, designed to keep us warm in our memories of last season's performances and to stoke the fires of anticipation for that time that we can gather for fresh shows beneath absolutely genuine pearl gray and blue canvas. Can't wait. We're approaching the end of our winter edition of Tiny Tent Show. We have just this week's show and next week's show in the hopper. But don't despair, that means that spring is right around the corner. Looking out my window, I can surmise that it's possibly going to be a big old snowy corner, maybe some slush and ice yet before we get there, but it's going to be good to see summer. Tonight we're going to feature our fabulous house band, the Blue Canvas Orchestra. We're also going to look back to September 2021 and a show by Marty Stuart, the amazing Marty Stuart, astounding musician, prolific songwriter, member of the Country Music Hall of Fame. You're also going to get a couple of stories from yours truly, including one about my grandma. So let's get going. Summer's waiting.
Well, I was passing by an old pawn shop on the older part of town. Something caught my eye and I stopped and turned around. I stepped inside and there I spied in the middle of it all was a beat up old guitar hanging on the wall. What do you want for that piece of junk? I asked the old man. He just smiled and took it down, put it in my hand. You tell me what it's worth. You're the one who wants it. Tune it up, play a song, let's just see what haunts it. Well, I hit a couple chords in my old country way of strumming. Then my fingers turned to lightning, man, I never heard it coming. It was like I always knew it, I just don't know where I learned it. It wasn't nothing but the truth, so I just reared back and burned it. Burn it up, Randy. Nothing I couldn't pick. Up and down the neck, man, I never missed a lick. The guitar almost played itself. There was nothing I could do. And it was getting hard to tell just who was playing who. When I finally put it down, I couldn't catch my breath. My hands were shaking, I was scared to death. The old man finally got up and said, "Where in the hell have you been? I've been waiting all these years for you to stumble in." And then he took down an old dusty case and said, "Go on, pack it up. You don't owe me nothing." Then he said, "Good luck." There was something spooky in his voice, something strange on his face. And when he shut the lid, I saw my name was on the case. Minus B.
The Strawberry Fields.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah?
yeah. Well, the Beatles, they wrote a lot of pieces about, Norway. Remember, they wrote about Norway, Norwegian wood.
Yeah, Norwegian Wood.
Norwegian
yeah.
Wood.
You remember that song? That was a good one.
I think that's probably the only song about Norway.
No, there's another one too.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Matter of fact, Sev, you and I did that several years ago. Yeah. It just wasn't as popular as Norwegian Wood.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
More popular.
Oh, yeah.
It's more popular.
We'll try to make this one more popular. Okay. He's a real Norway man, sitting in his Norway land, making all his Norway plans for Norse buddies. Doesn't have a point of view, knows not where he's going to. Isn't he a bit like you and me? Norway man, please listen. You don't know what you're missing. Norway man, the world is at your command. He's as blind as he can be, just sees what he wants to see. Norway man, can you see me at all? Norway man, don't worry, take your time, don't hurry, leave it all till somebody else lends you a hand. Oh, he's a real Norway man, sitting in his Norway land, making all his Norway plans for Norse buddies. Making all his Norway plans for Norse buddies. Manga tak, yeah.
Wow.
Yes, my father was Norwegian, and he would have been 95 years old today if he had survived. Wally Gunderson.
Happy birthday.
We got a capital ship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What year do you think this song was written?
I think it's something like 1889, I think.
Okay, 1889, folks.
Close to it.
We like the old tunes.
You're just making up numbers.
It's got some really playful lyrics.
Somebody's going to be Googling it.
Give or take 1 or 2 years.
Oh, yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
Let it rip.
Ready? And 1, 2, 3, and.
A capital ship for an ocean trip was a walloping window blind. No wind that blew dismayed her crew nor troubled the captain's mind. The man at the wheel was made to feel contempt for the wildest blow. Though it oft appeared when the weather had cleared, he's been in his bunk below. So blow ye winds high-o, a roving I will go. I'll stay no more on England's shores, so let the music play. I'm off on the morning train, I'll cross the bounding main. I'm off to my love with a boxing glove 10,000 miles away. The boatswain's mate was very sedate, yet fond of amusement too. He played hopscotch on the starboard watch while the captain tickled the crew. The gunner we had was apparently mad, for he sat on the after rail. and he fired salutes with the captain's boots in the teeth of a booming gale. So blow ye winds high-o, a-roving I will go. I'll stay no more on England's shores, so let the music play. I'm off on the morning train, I'll cross a bounding main. I'm off to my love with a boxing glove 10,000 miles away. The captain sat on the Commodore's hat and dined in a royal way of roasted pigs and pickles and figs and gummery bread each day. The cook, he was Dutch and behaved as such, for the diet he served the crew was a couple of tons of hot cross buns served up with sugar and glue. So blow the winds high-o, a-roving I will go. I'll stay no more on England's shore, so let the music play. I'm off on the morning train, I'll cross the bounding main. I'm off to my love with her boxing glove 10,000 miles away. And we all fell ill as mariners will, on a diet that's cheap and rude. And we shivered and shook as we dipped the cook in a tub of his gluesome food. Then nautical pride we laid aside as we cast the vessel ashore. On the Gully Isles where the poo-poo smiles and the Alexander's roar. So blow ye winds high-o, a-roving I will go. I'll stay no more on England's shore, so let the music play. I'm off on the morning train, I'll cross the bounding main. I'm off to my love with a boxing glove 10,000 miles away.
Well, there's a lot of unsung heroes in the world, and they remain unsung until somebody writes a song about them. I saw a moment, and I seized it, and I'd like you to help me sing this unsung hero, who is now a sung hero. It's two words. Two words. You'll pick up on it right away, I'm sure. This is the Ballad of Baronet Bob. Baronet Bob, Baronet Bob. He's the only man for the job. Baronet Bob, Baronet Bob. If you want the best ear of corn on the cob, it's Baronet Bob, Baronet Bob. Up and down Highway 63, running wild and running free, bringing the goods to you and me. I dare anyone to disagree. Baronet Bob makes his living from the back of a truck. Baronet Bob, Baronet Bob. The best sweet corn you'll ever shuck. Baronet Bob, Baronet Bob. Pick up a dozen for just $5. Baronet Bob, Baronet Bob. He'll lost 4 fingers in an old combine, but that doesn't stop him, he's doing just fine. He's as tough as a watermelon vine. Drive on up and get in line. Get Baronet Bob's. From Cumberland to Superior Shores, it's Baronet Bob. It's Baronet Bob. If he's in town, better run out the door to Baronet Bob's. Baronet Bob's. If you're too late, there ain't no more. To Baronet Bob's. Baronet Bob's. In dungarees and dusty boots, he don't need no 3-piece suits. If you ask him, he don't give 2 hoots about all of the women in hot pursuit. Of Baronet Bob. At the end of the summer, where does he go? Baronet Bob, Baronet Bob. I've heard it's down to Mexico. Baronet Bob, Baronet Bob. The fact of the matter we'll never know. Baronet Bob, Baronet Bob. Down to a island in a little grass shack in the middle of the desert of the beaten track. By the end of the summer, he'll be back with melons and tomatoes in a gunny sack. It's Baronet Bob. This is the Ballad of Baronet Bob. Baronet Bob. Baronet Bob. He's the only man for the job. It's Baronet Bob, Baronet Bob. If you want the best ear of corn on the cob, it's Baronet Bob, it's Baronet Bob. Baronet Bob, Baronet Bob, Baronet Bob, oh Baronet Bob, Baronet Bob. It's Baronet Bob, oh Baronet Bob. It's Baronet Bob, it's Baronet Bob, it's Baronet Bob, Baronet Bob.
Very nice of you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that terrific introduction.
Yeah, you're welcome. No, I just wanted to set them up for you, just keep the...
You can always tell when it comes from the
Engineer.
heart. When I say the Blue Canvas Orchestra is a terrific band, I'm not just buttering them up because Ed's so nice to me. It's true. I've actually played with them, and one of the ways that you can learn how good a band is if you play not very well, and then you play with a band that is very good. So I know about 4 chords on the guitar and 2 very particular rhythms. And so whoever I play with has to be able to kind of... I always say that any band that plays with me should be called the bowling bumpers, like they put up at the bowling alley, because when I start a song, it kind of goes like this, and it might kind of bump off the side, and then it bumps off the other side, and the band just kind of eases me right down to the end, and occasionally I knock over a pin when it's all over. And I think in a nutshell, you can describe my guitar playing. We did do one, my band did a show during all the quarantine. We did one of those live streams, and we were getting ready for it, and there was a sound tech that hadn't worked with us before, and my band leader is there, and the sound tech, not realizing I'm sitting there, says to
my band leader, he said, well, does Mike play guitar? And my band leader said, Mike has a guitar. And then I managed to record a song over the quarantine too, and we put together a little video for it, and I brought it into the house to share with my family. And my wife and my younger daughter and I are downstairs, and we had it up on the TV, playing the video and playing the song for the first time. And my 21-year-old daughter was home from college, and she came downstairs and said, what is this heinous music you're playing? So I get support from a lot of people besides Ed. I grew up on the farm, and there was a time, even within the scope of my memory, I'm 56 now, but there was a time when children would look forward to the arrival of the J.C. Penney Christmas catalog. Yeah. So nowadays you get 3-4 catalogs a day, and a lot of our shopping is online. But the J.C. Penney Christmas catalog, it was extra thick, and it was stuffed with all these unattainable goodies. I remember my brothers and I, we'd always leave it lying around the house open to the go-kart page. We was relying on the power of suggestion, which frankly yielded diddly. 'Cause we never did get a go-kart. We had to settle for giving each other rides in the barn cleaner, which is exciting in its own way. But I tell my friends from the city that riding in the barn cleaner, it's kind of like super slow-mo surfing. You just got to hop off before it goes up the chute. So like most kids, my brothers and sisters and I looked forward to the arrival of the J.C. Penney Christmas catalog. But we were farm kids, so what we really looked forward to was the arrival of the American Breeders' Service Bull catalog. Now, if you're not familiar, the ABS catalog is basically Playgirl for cows. It's filled with page after page of pictures of the ultimate bulls. These are the Greek gods of the bovine world. And they always had these amazing 4-part names. I remember one of the most popular ones back in my day was something, something, something Belshazzar. Right out of the Old Testament. They always had these fancy names like Golden Turkish Alfalfa Rocket. So my siblings and I, we'd sit down at the kitchen table there with that bull catalog, and we'd go through it page by page, and we'd look at the pictures of the bulls. They also had little charts of data that would describe the particular traits that each bull was known for bringing forth in the cows that he created. I remember they had one category that was called udder tilt, and we'd study that pretty close. But anyways, we'd go through this whole catalog, and then we'd gather up all this data, and we'd say, yeah, Dad, this one here, Spanky Tango Cremora Blaster. He's the one for our cows. And of course, in retrospect, knowing what I didn't know then about my parents' financial situation at that time, I'm pretty sure Dad just went to the back of the catalog to the discount section there, bull in a bucket, and just ordered pretty much the cheapest product available. But then sometime within the next 8 hours, the artificial inseminator would arrive, and he would walk into the barn and commit astounding acts. When you're a country kid growing up in rural Wisconsin on a farm with no TV, artificial inseminator is combination science exhibit and freak show on wheels. And we never missed it. He'd roll into the yard in his pickup, and in the back there he'd have this little silver canisters about the size of a beer pony. And there's liquid nitrogen in there that kept the semen frozen. He'd pop the top off, and these wisps of mysterious fog would roll up and down the sides. And if he had time and he liked it, he'd let you dip a string in there, and when you pulled it out, you could snap it just like a twig. And he'd dip in there somehow, and he'd pull out the little container of bull semen, and he would attach it to some little syringy thing, which he would then attach to a long, slender pipette. And then I don't know if this was standard operating procedure or just our guy's special thing, but he would then carry that pipette full of semen crossways in his teeth. Because I remember we'd be waiting in the barn, and he'd step through the door, backlit by the sun, and he had them big rubber boots on, and he had that thing crossways in his teeth, and I was always reminded of a pirate boarding a ship. And I assume that the cows had a similar reaction. But anyways, my dad, he'd hang a tag behind the cow that he wanted serviced, and then seminary would locate the tag, and then he'd locate the cow, and then he would draw on a long shoulder-length plastic glove, and he'd grab the cow by the tail. And if you can't figure out the rest, see me after class. I can't say that the cows were ever visibly distressed by what certainly had to be a disruption in their day. There was really only two outward signs, and the first is that they'd stop chewing their cud. They'd be like, and then the other thing was that their eyes would pop, not a lot, just a little, kind of like if you was walking down the street and you went, I was supposed to pay my taxes yesterday. But anyways, in addition to the bull portraits and data in the catalog, there always also were a couple of pictures of some of the cows that each bull had cast. And if the bulls were the Greek gods of the bovine world, these cows are the Marilyn Monroes. They left a farm boy slightly breathless. And it has been a long time since cows have been central to my life, but they still occupy my thoughts. And a while back, I had the opportunity to write a description of my dream cow, and I'd like to share that with you now. There was, in Chippewa County, where I'm from, a cow that would make you despair all other cows. A gloriously big-boned Holstein, deep in the forerib, long in the spine, and fronted with a brisket, the lines of which brought to mind the prow of a felted barkentine. Her dewlap rose to a sturdy throat, which gave way to a sweeping jawbone, which attached to a generally trapezoidal skull, crowned with a bony pompadour. Her eyes were translucent brown dewdrops, the size of mallard eggs, fringed with delicate swaths of lash. Her nose, pebbled and moist, was the size of a large boxing glove. The nostrils, while large enough to admit an English sparrow each, were delicately drawn, and her breath, grassy with just a hint of hops, was not unpleasant. Astern, her sturdy, up-tilted tailhead rose from betwixt the twin thurls of an architectural backside, the tail itself dropping on a straight, clean line past her pin bones to her hocks, where it plumed and fluffed to a voluminous switch that whispered against her dew claws when she walked. Girthy but firm at 1,800 pounds, the Holstein stood 60 inches at the withers, poised on clean hooves and draped nose to heels in a tight-napped pelt the color of drift snow and coal tar. At the vertex of flank and thigh, her udder bloomed a sculpted marvel, big as a bushel, firm as a block of butter, boldly veined, furred with clean white hair the texture of toasted velour, and anchored by twin milk veins running the abdomen like woolly ropes. The teats, arranged about the four corners in a dignified quartet, were sturdy but symmetrical and gracefully tapered. To press your cheek against this udder was to worship at the terminus of a genetic journey traceable to the Batavians and Frisians who first mingled their herds in the Rhine Delta around the time of Christ. This was a temple to butterfat, a shrine to calcium and cream, a ruminant Helen capable of launching 1,000 milk mustaches. This was a glorious clover-fueled bovine dream. This was Chippewa's chipper princess, Turbaline. Thanks. My brother is a farmer. He still has cows, and he heard me read that piece once, and he said, "Stay out of my barn." Well, one other quick little thing. So I love the people from New York. They've helped me. They've changed my life. They've done so much for me. But occasionally, I just got to shake my head. You know, like I love to say about them is sometimes they're surprised to discover that out here in the Midwest, sometimes we think things up all by ourselves. and they're always trying to fly me out of Milwaukee. And they always say, your book tour is set up, but you fly out, your flight leaves Milwaukee at 10 a.m. on Tuesday morning. And I say, well, take your hand and make yourself a map of Wisconsin. I said, don't forget Door County. I said, this right here, this is the New Auburn / Fall Creek area. Drive 4.5, 5 hours, that's Milwaukee. I said, now go on back up to the New Auburn / Fall Creek area, drive an hour and a half due west, Minneapolis, St. Paul. They've got an airport there with airplanes that go all over the world. And twice I've had two separate publicists do the exact same thing. There's a beat of silence, and then they said, but you're from Wisconsin. And I said, yeah, and we have an open border policy with Minnesota. But I remember after I drove out there and had that meeting, when I drove home, so this is early 2002. And when I left in my little Ford Tempo, one of the last things I did was I turned and looked back to see New York City, the lights of New York City I left at night. And at that time, there were still the two twin spires of light shooting up into the sky. If you remember, they set up that memorial. That was just those two columns of light. And I thought of that. And I'm going to read, I was asked to write a piece immediately after 9/11, 20 years ago. And I was out in a little cabin in the middle of the woods. And it's odd to read it 20 years from now, but I'm going to read it without comment. And I think you can just sort of draw your own reactions and thoughts. And again, I read this respectfully to the person who requested it. This is a message in a bottle. I send it from a peaceful little island, a cabin in the woods, built by my brothers when they were young. I'm the oldest, but their competence with tools, with machinery, with their hands, surpassed my own long ago. It's October, but the mercury will drop well below freezing tonight. Every half hour, I stoke the stove. The cabin is simple, solid, and square, chinked with concrete. The hand-peeled logs still as Buddha. There are three sounds: the ruffle and snap of the fire, the hiss of the lantern, and the clack of my Smith Corona Classic 12. This cabin sits on ground I memorized from childhood. I lock myself in here when the words aren't coming, or when I need to face down the black dog. The bare logs, the wooden chair and table, the silence, they force the necessary confrontations. There are Thoreauvian overtones, but I'm really not much of an ascetic. Some of my best writing and thinking I do all hopped up on Little Debbie zebra cakes and black coffee, listening to three-chord roots rock. Tonight, though, I have a craving to unplug and go acoustic. I wonder what we know now. Now, the moment you're reading this, the tumblers have been set in motion. Every second is a forking path. As I write, the woods are dark, save for the pale daubs of lantern light angling out the cabin windows. It seems like Earth might be rotating around this coordinate. It is stunning to think of all humankind made contiguous by the globe. It is difficult to think in terms of governments, of man's inhumanity to man. It is earthen and peaceful here. Where I live, we were looking east all day that day, through the television, over the web, with an ear to the radio. We peered through the smoke and the flags and began to get a sense of magnitude. In a faraway city, skyscrapers were falling. Would the tremors reach our little township, where the only structure over 2 stories is a 4-legged water tower? Our volunteer fire department met for training the following evening. There are 24 of us, amateurs playing at a game in which the professionals regularly get their tails whipped. Flipping through Firehouse magazine before the meeting, I saw that 102 firefighters died in the line of duty in the year 2000. One rumbling instant in New York, and that number was eclipsed. The last burning structure I crawled into was a trailer. We were looking for a guy who turned out to be gone. Until courage meets circumstance, there are no heroes. Tell me, how is the nation's resolve? Very few volunteer firefighters quit the department at the sight of big flames. They quit when they realize the bulk of the battle is a back-breaking slog. Hours spent burrowing and hacking through soggy debris to extinguish intransigent little hot spots. You begin a warrior and wind up a drudge, rolling hose, cleaning equipment, restocking the rigs. The September 11 attacks were nationally iconic. Our response was equally so. Unity, strength, charity. But the battle will not always live up to the telethon. Resolutions of substance generally require heavy lifting and extended attention to the mundane. I reckon I'm a pickup truck coveting blue-collar capitalist, but this talk of preserving the nation through the wielding of credit cards and the acquisition of king cabs at 0% APR makes me snort. It's hard to know what more, if anything, will be required of us. I'm not overly worried. My neighbors have already crawled through fire with me. An East Coast friend said she figured I'd be hearing a lot of rural tavern talk of how it was time to kick some racially derogatory ass. Well, sure. There's always some loudmouth eager to swab the flag around like a World Wrestling Federation banner. But I heard equivalent sentiments expressed on NPR and CNN, refined only in terms of diction and dress. Bigotry and extremism have commonality. Both are difficult to eradicate. Both respond poorly to benevolence, and both are an embarrassment to those impugned through putative association. The battle for civility will outlast all others. My people are farmers and loggers and hunters. I grew up slinging manure, the metaphorical basis for a writing career. Thousands have died, bombs are falling, and in response, here I sit composing an essay. I feel as if I'm throwing cotton candy at a steamroller. I cherish my spot on our little fire department because if something's burning, we put water on it. Action over postulation. A week after the first attacks, we were alerted by naval intelligence that terrorists were thought to be targeting fire trucks for theft and use as car bombs. The intelligence was later revised, but we took some measures. One of us can sit down there with a deer rifle if need be. I will say it's a heck of a thing to have naval intelligence briefings arriving in rural Chippewa County, Wisconsin. A shame and a comfort, really. The tremors spread. By morning, the wood stove is dead cold. It takes a little internal dialogue to get me to unzip my Army surplus sleeping bag. I stow the Smith Corona under the bunk and shoulder my backpack. When I come out of the woods, I hear Osama bin Laden say, "There is fear in America." So be it. Courage does not arise out of comfort. I'm going to try to tell a story that I haven't told for 2 years. So we'll see where it goes. It's all right, I've made a living off of going off on tangents. I got what I call functional ADD. I've told you up here before that the way my head works, I got a call one day about from an editor who was putting together an anthology of Midwestern writing, and he said, "We would like you to write a 10,000-word essay on Wisconsin." And that was the extent of his instruction. And the way my head works is I sat down and I went, okay, well, Wisconsin, let's see. Wisconsin reminds me of cows. Cows remind me of milk. Milk reminds me of cheese. Cheese reminds me of cheese heads. Cheese heads remind me of the Green Bay Packers. And the Green Bay Packers remind me of the meaning of life. And as long as you can keep track of all them tangents and bring them back to where you started, that's called an essay. And you can sell them, which is good news for me, because as I've been telling people, I've got 2 daughters. One's in college and one's in braces. So this story I'm going to try to tell tonight, I've told it up here before, but I haven't told it in a couple of years, so we'll see if I can get through it. I know where I want to end, so that's important. I want to end with one of my favorite lines ever, and one of the things as a writer is you're always trying to encapsulate things and create great lines. But I have about 5 stories that I tell that are kind of my 5 greatest hits. And one of the things that I find intriguing about them is 4 out of 5 is just me quoting somebody else. I don't know what that says about me, other than I'm just a very attentive stenographer. But this story, it ends with one of my favorite lines ever. But it also involves me talking about my Grandma Perry. My Grandma Perry, she had a hard life. And she was hard on the rest of us, too. But she was not one of these bake you sugar cookies grandmas. As a matter of fact, she only baked cookies once a year, and that was at Christmas. And they were those ones that, they were extruded from that caulk gun thing. Spritz cookies, those are the ones. But to this day, I don't know what Spritz cookies taste like, because Grandma burned about 2 packs of Carlton 100s a day. And them Spritz cookies, that's what they tasted like. I always said not only did us kids breathe Grandma's secondhand smoke, we ate it. I lived with her and Grandpa when I was going to college, and she loved to iron clothes, and I'm not being a dumb man. She truly she found peace in that, and she loved the neatness of it and everything. And I can still see her down in the laundry room, and she had her ironing board set up, and she would just iron. Everything would be so crisp, but that whole time, man, she had a heater burning. She had one of them little sandbag ashtrays, yeah. She had that right down there at the end of the ironing board, and she'd keep that heater going half the time, burn, 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 like this. And so what I had is I always had all these wonderfully crisp iron shirts that smelled like Carlton 100s, and they had little gray skid marks in them because she'd be ashing a little bit, hit that with the... But I have her ashtray next to my desk, right? I burn a little incense in there once in a while for Grandma, that's right. But anyways, about once every summer, my younger brother John and we would be allowed to go and spend 1 week at Grandma's house. And it was a big deal for us because Grandma lived in the city. And there was 2 things that we looked forward to, me and my brother John, when we went to stay with Grandma. And one was that she had a TV. I was raised in a very obscure fundamentalist Christian sect, and we didn't dance, we didn't go to the movies, we didn't listen to the radio, and we weren't allowed to have TVs. But thank goodness Grandma was a sinner. So she had a TV. The other thing that we loved to go to Grandma's for is we got to eat fresh boxed cereal. And I'm being very specific there because I grew up in a farm family that fluctuated from 6 to 9 kids, and we didn't have a lot of money. I'd always say, for the record, I never went to bed hungry, and I always knew I was loved. The 2 most important privileges that probably a kid from Chippewa County could have. But Mom had to really stretch a dollar, and to this day, I don't really know how she did it. Well, I do know how she did it. She never went shopping for groceries until she had a fistful of coupons the size of a bad Uno hand. And the other, I like that one. It just takes you just a little while to So thanks for hanging in there. And I know the other way that she stretched the food dollar was at breakfast, because my mom bought oatmeal in 25-pound bags. And I'm not just being writerly. I mean, I can still see them stacked on the porch. And 4 mornings a week, we had oatmeal. And on Fridays, it was treat day, and sometimes you got to have cornmeal mush with molasses in it. Or if she was really feeling beneficent, we could have a bowl of oatmeal with up to 5 chocolate chips melted in it. And except for the one time she switched over to carob chips, that's the only time in my life that my mother has ever lied to me. She said they taste just like chocolate chips. They don't taste just like, I still carry a hurt in me from the carob chips. Oh, and the one year, our neighbor, the farmer next door, he's one of them crop farmers. It was corn, beans. But one year, he must have been reading the futures markets. He planted wheat. And my mom went over with the pickup truck right into his field when he was combining that wheat. And she had a 50-gallon plastic garbage barrel. And she talked him into letting her fill that right out of the gravity box. And so we had this huge tub of wheat. And we would have boiled wheat for breakfast with a little extra grasshopper leg in there every once in a while. So, and the only time that we got to have boxed cereal was on Sunday morning. It was Mom's one concession to expediency to get 6 to 9 kids ready for church by 10 a.m. She would get out boxed cereal. And even the boxed cereal we had, there was a catch, because this was before the days of Walmart and Sam's Club. But there was, down in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, I remember going down there with it. There was this huge steel, dark, creepy building, and it was filled with all kinds of secondhand goods, including what I refer to as injured cereal. Whatever you bought was dented or scraped or something, and like my brothers and I say, we never ate cereal that didn't come from a box that looked like it'd been backed over by the truck that brought it. And so when my brother and I went down to spend our week with Grandma, we were very excited because we didn't have to clean calf pens, we didn't have to milk cows, and we got to watch TV and eat store-bought cereal. And that's what we called it, actually. We called it boughten cereal. And we called it boughten cereal because it didn't come from the neighbor's gravity box. And I always asked for Apple Jacks. And then I don't remember what my brother got, although I think I might know, because I remember we were sitting on the living room carpet one day watching Grandma's Devil's Box TV. And my brother, you got to know, at this time, he'd have been maybe 8 or 9 years old, but my brother has been 73 years old since he was 4. He just never has moved too fast or done anything too crazy. And like he's got a pilot's license, and he's got a little, let's call it a Cessna 175. I have no idea if that's what it is, but I'm going to call it. And if you're ever outside and a Cessna 175 comes over at about 300 feet doing 37 miles an hour with its left blinker on, that's my brother. But anyways, we were sitting there on the floor watching Grandma's TV, and one of them Total cereal ads came on. You know, the one where they go, you'd have to eat 12 bowls of Fruit Loops to get the nutrition in just one bowl of Total. And my brother, who couldn't have been more than 8 or 9, turned to me and said, I'll take the Fruit Loops. So there we are at Grandma's. Now, I've been kind of hard on Grandma. I talked about her smoking. She did smoke really heavy, man. She just burned through those Carltons. I have such fond memories. She'd get ready to smoke another one. She chewed that Clark's Tea Berry gum. I can still smell it. And she'd take out her gum and she'd stick it on the cellophane of the cigarette carton, and then she'd burn a heater, and then she'd go ahead and pop that gum back in. And my brother, John, the same one I just told the story, you know, again, as a writer, I like to pride myself on observation and concision and being able to capture someone's character in just a phrase. And my brother showed me up on that. We were talking about Grandma one time and Oliver smoking, and he said, yeah, you remember how she held her fishing reel? And I didn't. And Grandma loved to fish, and she had one of them old Zebco 33s. You know, you push the button with your thumb, and then you cast it out there, and then you reel. And he said, yeah, if you remember, she would hold the handle of the reel between her thumb and her third finger, free those other two up. But anyways, Grandma was not easy. I always say Grandpa died before she did, and I don't know what happens when you go, but I always said, based on my observation of how he handled things down here, man, if it is really just the podium and the gate and the whole deal, you know, St. Peter just said, man, come on in, have a seat. But anyways, Grandma wasn't easy, but she had a heart for the less fortunate. I watched her bail people out constantly. I watched her help folks who were down and out. And she also loved animals. And my grandma started the Eau Claire County Humane Association. And so when we were going down to stay with her, that was the early days of the Humane Association. And Grandma would be out there 5 days a week volunteering, helping that thing get off the ground. And so she would take us with her, and we had to clean cat pens and dog kennels and stuff and walk the dogs. And I remember she'd load us up in the back of her little red Duster, and she'd drive us out to the Humane Association, and I'd sit behind her. She was a tiny little woman, because I have a very clear memory of sitting behind her, and all I could see was her little perm and then her hands on that steering wheel. But we'd work out there, and they were a young nonprofit organization. They couldn't afford to hire people necessarily in a standard manner, and so they would bring in people who needed special jobs. And at a very young age, my brother and I, by working out there with those folks and hanging out with them in the break room, we became very conversant in the idea of the Huber Law and work release. And one of the folks, and I'm coming to the end now for my favorite line, one of the folks we met was a guy, I don't know what he did, why he was there, it's none of my business, but it was a guy named Randy. He was so sweet. He was very nice to us kids. He was very tall and skinny and very high-strung, and he smoked like 60. And that was back in the days they had a break room. You know, you walk in, there's just a pall of smoke hanging over it. So he'd clean a dog kennel, and then he'd come in and he'd have a cigarette, and then he'd clean a dog kennel, and he'd come in and have a cigarette. Well, my brother and I, one day, we decided we'd hide his cigarettes. And we weren't being mean. We clearly, as kids, had no idea how desperate he was for smoke. So we hid his cigarettes, and he just gets more and more frantic, and he's looking through the break room, and he's lifting the magazines, and he's checking other rooms, and it's just getting worse and worse. And finally, my brother and I decide it is time to give Randy his cigarettes back. So while he was in another room, we took his cigarette carton, and we set it right in the middle of the break room table where he couldn't help but see it. And he walked in there, and he saw those cigarettes, and he just pounced on them. And he popped one out, and he put it in his lips, and he lit it, and he took a huge drag on it, and then he uttered my favorite line of all time. He just went, oh, that's just like a breath of fresh air. Thanks so much for coming out tonight. We'll see you down the road.
Well, now it's time to shine our spotlight on a man that actually can get by without any extra illumination. He's been a bright star in the country music scene since he left home at the age of 13 to play mandolin for Lester Flatt. Then he played for Johnny Cash in the 60s and the 70s. He's been on the charts over 30 times, and he has won 5, yeah, that's right, as many fingers in one thumb as I have on a hand, 5 Grammys. I once rode on his tour bus with him, but that's a whole nother story. He wouldn't remember me, likely. Anyways, here's the man himself, without me in his way, Marty Stuart and his band, the Fabulous Superlatives.
Somebody ought to say howdy! Country, see I'm from out of town. I'm beginning to get my tone, I'm a letting my hair down. I've been a rocking, I've been a rolling. Some folks they got look foolish, let it make a fool out of me. Since the day I was born, I've been a rockin', I've been a rollin'. Some folks they got look foolish, let it make a fool out of me. Crowded dance hall, I didn't know a soul. Some hillbilly started picking, everybody rock and roll. I've been a rockin', I've been a rollin'. Some folks they got look foolish, let it make a fool out of me. Some folks they got look foolish, let it make a fool out of me. Some folks they got look foolish, let it make a fool out of me. Good night, thank you. Playing real music for real people, what about that? Oh yeah.
Thanks for joining us here on Tiny Tent Show, and remember to come on back next week for the winter edition finale featuring Warren Nelson and Friends, the Blue Canvas Orchestra, and a summer spotlight on the Glenn Miller Orchestra. If you've enjoyed this show, please head on over to www.bigtop.org and show your support by making a contribution. Your contributions are the fuel that keeps the Big Top running. We are very grateful from top to bottom. Tickets are already on sale for some of your summer shows, like American Pie's Don McLean, country legend Tanya Tucker, and bluegrass virtuoso Bella Fleck. We'll look forward to meeting you up at the tent when that snow out there melts. And now, as always, we thank our sponsors. Jim and Joy Perry, Roger and Sharon Shaver, Dick and Sandy Olson, Patrick and Mary Lou Irvin, Myra Einert, Roger and Marge Asplund. Thanks for joining us here on Tiny Tent Show. We'll see you one more time next week. And until then, I would not say goodbye. I would just say, well, I suppose.
Randy Speed.